Okay. Well, thank you for coming. It looks like we've probably split about half and half between this one and the other session over there. If you're already a cloud expert, you're probably not going to learn a whole lot today. But most of my time these days is talking with CEOs and CIOs and board members about this thing called the cloud that they really have no idea what that means. It's just a 5-letter word to them that they're spending a lot of money on. So I try to take this, raise the conversation up a little bit. And we'll get into a little bit of detail here. But really, when I try to have this conversation, it is, you're going to the cloud whether you realize it or not, so buckle up. And I just kind of walk through the reasons why, both from a business perspective and from a technical perspective, why it's important to them. And actually, there's a lot of CISOs that don't get this as well, that don't recognize the inevitability of the cloud. So I'll start with a little bit of humor. This is Mark Weatherford. Notice the resemblance? This Mark Weatherford was arrested in 2006 for building a bomb to blow up his city hall at some little town in Minnesota. At the time, I was traveling a lot, and you can imagine the fun TSA had with me every time I went to an airport. Because for some reason, my name got flagged and I got the special treatment. Well, it died away, and then about a month ago, I got pulled aside again and ran through the drill. And I've been stopped 3 times in the last month. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? This was a decade ago. But anyway, I just thought I would throw it up there. It's kind of interesting that you never die on the internet. So in 2009, I was the CISO for the state of California with Governor Schwarzenegger. And I gave a speech to all of the CISOs in the state of California, the state government in California. California, we had 162 boards, commissions, departments, agencies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And each of them had either a CISO or a director of security or something. And I got all these folks in a room, and I gave a talk, and one of the components of my talk was I said, this cloud thing is going to be a big deal. And we as security professionals need to be paying attention to it because it's going to impact our lives and our professional lives. And after my talk, a couple of CISOs literally ran. I was actually ready to hide, duck and hide. They ran up front and basically chastised me and said, over my dead body, will any of my data go into a cloud? And so I think, a decade later or 7 or 8 years later, I'm vindicated and they were wrong. But then I saw this note here from Andrew McAfee in 2011, and he basically says that the switch to the cloud is inevitable. And I think that really kind of sets the landscape for where we are today with the cloud. And any of you going through the process today know what I'm talking about, because this is truly probably one of the biggest infrastructure changes that we've gone through in my lifetime. I've been doing this all my life, been in this business. So, and then in December, Cisco put out their Cloud Index survey, and it said 86% of all workloads will be processed by the cloud by 2019. That's a really big deal. Now, granted, Cisco probably has a little skin in the game there, so the number may be skewed a little bit. But even if it's only partially right, that's a big dang deal. It's a big dang deal when you think about where we are today, when we think about our data centers, on-prem data centers that are, still racked and stacked with physical servers that are moving to the virtual environment. This is a really, really big deal. And because of that, and as I said earlier, the IT world is shifting from this physical infrastructure to a digital and software-defined infrastructure, and it's having tremendous impact on what the core infrastructure of our data centers in the cloud are. Back in 1998, VMware came on the scene with a virtualized product, and then over the years we've seen that migrate from compute to storage to networking and now security. Security is the next piece of software-defined everything. There's a lot of unbelievable products coming out. There's a lot of unbelievable research being done at various places around the world that I can't even imagine in my mind what the cloud is going to look like in 5 years. But good news for us, security is going to be a big part of that. I think the cloud gives us an opportunity, and I'll talk a little bit more later about why I think the cloud can be a catalyst for better security for all of us. So, as I talk with, even though I'm with a product company now, spent the last several years as a consultant working with Fortune 100s, and the thing that became obvious to me more than anything else is, Mark Andreessen said it back in 2011, the software is eating the world, but the reality is that every industry is being affected by the cloud today, being affected by technology today. And I challenge anybody to think of an industry that is not being revolutionized by, not just by technology, but by the services and opportunities of the cloud. I think one of the greatest, the sector having an impact that you may not recognize is agriculture. And everything from irrigation to livestock and farming, to fertilizing, to growing stuff. I mean, the cloud is revolutionizing agriculture, but it's revolutionizing everything else too. Manufacturing, certainly automobiles, everything is being impacted by the cloud. And we're seeing this transition now. This is another, by the way, if anybody has not seen this Wikibon Northbridge Ventures survey, it's a slide deck. I think there's 62 slides in it. It is unbelievable bit of data in there. But talking about public versus hybrid cloud strategies, use of public clouds up 43%, use of hybrid cloud up 19%, use of private clouds down 48%. I was actually surprised by that last number there. I think it's going to continue to go down, but the number is down a lot farther than I thought, and this is just since 2011. Obviously, SaaS is the most deployed cloud service, and when you look at the growth of this, the projected growth of this is mind-boggling. This is why, not just from a technology and from a security perspective, but from a business perspective, CEOs and boards are absolutely paying attention to what's happening with the cloud, because this is changing the way they're spending money. This is changing the way their capital expenditures versus their operational expenditures are happening every year. And if you're a CISO, and I'll talk about this in a minute, but if you're a CISO, you are having this conversation with your CEO today, probably. Certainly, I guarantee you, if you're a Fortune 500 CISO, you're having this conversation. IT and business operations are moving to the cloud. 85% of web content management, 82% of communications, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I really get excited about the business part of this. 81% of sales and marketing, 80% of analytics, 80% of customer services, 73% of HR and payroll. Everything is moving to the cloud, and there's a reason for that. The reason is that it's more efficient, and it's less expensive to do this in the cloud. We have this static versus dynamic investment. If I go out and spend $1 million on hardware for security, or $1 million on applications for my business, then I have to worry about the tail of that. I have to worry about the maintenance, I have to worry about the training of my people, I have to worry about the contract's going to come up again next year. And if I take advantage of the cloud, if I buy the same service in the cloud, I can adjust. If I have greater demand at different periods of the year, I can buy more or buy less. I don't necessarily have to worry about training my people, at least to the level that I would have to if I owned the software myself. You only pay for the capacity that you need. And we were talking about insurance, cybersecurity insurance a little bit earlier with someone. I can transfer some of my risk. Not all of my risk, and I can't transfer the responsibility, but I can transfer some of my risk to the cloud provider when I move my services to the cloud. So we live today in this multi-cloud world, and I don't think we're ever going to get away from this multi-cloud environment. You know, we've moved away basically from a physical data center with physical servers and racks as far as you can see of servers. And we've gone through this transition to virtual and cloud and this multi-cloud world where your organization, everybody's going to maintain, I believe, some capacity on-prem. I mean, you're never going to move everything to the cloud. And that's not true. So there are some small companies that they don't own anything. They don't have they don't even have a closet any longer. Everything is done in the cloud. But for most companies, I think, certainly for larger companies, you're going to maintain some presence on site. But you're going to have stuff in Amazon, you're going to have stuff in Azure, you're going to have stuff at CenturyLink or wherever it might be. So the ability to manage your security across this multi-cloud environment, I think, is one of the great challenges that we have today. Or as Wendy says, one of the great opportunities we have today. By the way, I love that. I'm going to use that. I'm going to steal that. I have a talk tomorrow. I'm going to use that one. But is it safe? So you may remember this movie. Some of you may remember this movie, Marathon Man, Dustin Hoffman. And Laurence Olivier, this is Laurence Olivier, he was this doctor, and does anybody see this movie? At least a few of you. So go watch it, it's a good movie. But Laurence Olivier wants to know what Dustin Hoffman knows. So he keeps saying, is it safe? And Dustin Hoffman says, I don't know, is it safe? I don't know. So he drills a hole in his tooth. And he says, is it safe? And he goes, yes, it's safe. He drills another hole. Is it safe? No, it's not safe. He drills another hole. He's like, what do you want me to say? He drills another hole. And I think that's the way, in security, we feel like that sometimes. Is it safe? If you're a CISO or anybody that's in the security business, somebody has asked you at some point in your life, is it safe today? Are we safe? Are we secure? Have we done everything we need to do? Well, everyone knows that that's an unanswerable question because we can always do more. We think we've done enough oftentimes. But is the cloud safe? Did those three guys running up to me after my talk, did they have a point? Is it safe that I'll never move my data to a cloud? I think that's where the opportunity is. So, we've been saying this for several years now, that the perimeter is dead, long live the perimeter. And I think it's fairly well recognized and acknowledged by most people that if you think your vertical stack of security products out on your perimeter is protecting you, you have missed the boat. You haven't been paying attention because technology has moved on really quickly. We have a whole lot of stuff happening within our environment now and outside our environment that impact the ability of a perimeter to provide that level of protection that we used to depend on it for. So this 80-20 rule, I think, is really important for us. And the 80-20 rule basically says that about 20% of the traffic in a virtual environment, whether it's your on-prem data center or your cloud, 20% of the traffic actually flows north and south, flows through that vertical stack of security products. What that means is that 80% of the traffic is flowing east and west, and guess what? You're not seeing it. Most of you are not seeing it. Unless you've bought one of the products that's come out in the last year or so, you are not able to see this east-west traffic right now. And that should make everyone very uncomfortable because there's a lot of stuff that happened. You know, we've seen some examples of this where when companies get the opportunity to see this east-west traffic, most of them want to pass out because there's so much stuff going on. So there's users talking to applications, talking to databases that have no idea or no reason or rationale for why they should be doing that. So security challenges and opportunities. I like this term, challenges and opportunities. So separation of assets is obvious. You think about this, you think about now your data center, you have thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands in some cases of VMs that are spinning up and spinning down, and you have no idea. The ability to microsegment, and this is the buzzword du jour these days, the ability to microsegment, that is secure down to that individual workload, is really changing the security game. The ability to see, to get down to each one of those individual machines from the time it's provisioned till the time it's deprovisioned is changing the security game. Giving you visibility, as I mentioned earlier, visibility across this east-west traffic is giving us as security professionals, it's giving us a new level of visibility into our infrastructure that helps us then make some decisions on how do we deploy our resources, how do we identify what resources we even need or that we may not have. Detecting and mitigating APTs and insider threats. Insider threats continues to be, I think, the most overlooked problem that we have as security professionals. And if I took a survey, I'm pretty confident that most of you would agree with that. It continues to be the one issue that we see over and over and over. And it's not necessarily malicious insiders, but there's a lot of naive and ignorant insiders. And I love Wendy's quote earlier of, you know, stopping 1,000 DDoS or launching 1,000 DDoS is easy. Stopping 1,000 clicks is really hard. Because you are going to have users out there, despite your best efforts, are going to do everything in their power to defeat you, ignorantly or not. Investigating security incidents and incident response and forensics. I think the ability to microsegment and see these individual workloads that I talked about a second ago is going to be a game changer for the incident response community. If any of you have done incident response, and probably many of you have, you know that after you have an incident, finding patient zero sometimes takes months. I mean, and then finding who talked to patient zero takes months. Today, with some of the technologies that we're seeing, the ability to find patient zero happens at a click of a button, a click of a mouse. And then it's very easy to look from an affinity perspective to look across your infrastructure and see who all talked to patient zero. So we're able to take incident response from weeks or months down to minutes or hours in some cases. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, managing across this multi-cloud world, I think, is probably going to be one of the greatest values for us as we migrate, as we evolve our organizations and our infrastructures Because you may be in Azure today, and you may be in AWS tomorrow, or you may be in both on the third day. And the ability to maintain state across this is going to be increasingly important for us as security professionals. Shadow IT. You know, shadow IT has always been a challenge for us. I sent out a little informal survey on Facebook to a bunch of my friends a couple of weeks ago. I said, how many of you think shadow IT is a problem? Almost everybody said, you know, gave me some variation of yes, it's a problem because, you know, one, we can't budget right if we don't know what people are doing. We certainly have security problems if we don't know what people are buying. One of my friends who's a developer says, I call it getting stuff done. And really, I mean, if you think about it, that's the reason why that's the reason why shadow IT is happening so much, because we have processes that take time to verify, validate, resource, staff the acquisition of product. It doesn't make sense today when I can go to AWS, I can pull out my credit card, and I can go to the marketplace, and I can say, I want 2 quad processors, I want this amount of memory, I want these 2 applications, and I want to use it from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. every Tuesday for the next 3 months. Click. I can buy a product and a service that easily and that quickly. So I predict that shadow IT is going to continue to be a problem. It may become a greater problem for us as the availability and the ubiquitousness of the cloud continue to grow. So one of the conversations I have is, and I would love to take a survey of the audience and see who's had this conversation about the cloud. People think that, okay, I have just bought AWS and they are taking care of all of my security problems now. So I wash my hands of it. I have no more security responsibilities. So when I hear somebody say that, my kind of line of thinking goes along lines of, okay, if you have a virus, whose responsibility is that? And people think, well, that must be Amazon's responsibility. No, that's your responsibility. If you have a rogue employee that starts doing something, whose responsibility is that? It's not Amazon's responsibility. That's your responsibility as well. So you start getting that, and then when you think of this, all of this stuff up here, this is what you are responsible for. And I go back to what I said earlier. You can outsource some of the responsibility, but you cannot outsource all of the responsibility. And quite frankly, you don't want to outsource all the responsibility. So the cloud is a catalyst. I really believe this. This is the money slide here. I believe this is the most important reason why the cloud is going to be good for us. The economic advantages, we've already made the case that the economic advantages of the cloud probably are, the reason why this tidal wave is not stopping. A friend of mine, just talked with him the other day, over the weekend. He said he has all of his DNS being backed up for his company in Amazon. It costs him 88 cents a month. You cannot argue with economics like that. Just thinking about buying a piece of hardware and then the time that it would take you to do that is way more than that. The cloud provides anytime, anywhere access, high reliability and automatic backups. There's a case to be made for this with the wave of ransomware that's been occurring, that if you can disassociate your backups from your internal environment, that it's probably something you should be considering. I'm not going to talk about I'm not going to talk about ransomware at all, other than to say, if you don't know what it is and you're not paying attention to it, you are in big, big trouble. The bottom one here is this is the point I think that many of us have been making for several years, though, and that is cloud providers are highly incentivized to deliver security. They have to. AWS, Microsoft, any of the cloud service providers, they cannot afford to have a security event. It is devastating to their business. People would flee their business. And some of you know Dave Cullinane. Dave was CISO of Washington Mutual. This was probably a decade ago. But he said when they had a security event at Washington Mutual, they would lose 25% of their customers in the next 30 days. And I predict, we're going to have this same kind of challenge with the cloud. Think about this, the impact of a security event on AWS. Holy cow, it doesn't just impact one person there, it could impact, millions and millions of companies. So I think this is probably the most important piece of the cloud for us, is that while we still want to pay attention to it, the cloud service providers have to provide a higher level of security. And again, it's not because we as CISOs and security professionals don't want to and don't know what we need to do. We just simply don't have the resources to do it in most cases, whereas they have the resources and they're highly incentivized to efficiently deploy those resources. So people ask, and I didn't make this up, I just found this. You can go out and search on the web for questions to ask your cloud service provider. This is just one that I thought was pretty complete, and it's from Steve Lawton wrote it for Tom's IT Pro. But you need to think about the questions to ask your cloud service provider before you start moving stuff out. One thing that I've learned is vendors do not get better after you sign a contract. If they suck before you sign the contract, that's as good as it's ever going to get. And cloud service providers are the same way. You have got to make sure that you ask the right kinds of questions. I can remember, 5 or 6 years ago going in and asking very fundamental things. Can I visit your data center? No. Well, why would I want to make you my vendor of choice then if I can't visit your data center? Can I see my logs? No. Well, why would I put my stuff there if I can't see the security log? Now, these have changed today. But again, just like we were talking earlier about these exclusions in cybersecurity insurance, if you do not ask the questions, or if you ask the wrong questions, you're going to get the wrong answer. And after you sign the contract, you have to live with it then. So again, I'm not going to go through these. You can go Google it and you can find questions to ask your CSP, and there's dozens of them out there. But just to make you aware and think about this, it's not just, even with AWS, you want to know what you're buying before you sign the contract. So I'm going to change speeds for just a second here. Everybody's heard of the top 20 critical controls? Let me ask it differently. Has anybody not heard of the top 20 critical controls? Thank God. Okay, I'm not going to talk about the top 20 critical controls other than to say, let me ask this, does anybody know any company that has successfully deployed all top 20 critical controls and maintain compliance with all top 20? Good. I don't either. I worked in some pretty significant organizations, even in the federal government, and I couldn't ever say this. So with that as a backdrop, has anybody seen this? Does anybody do business in California? You're lucky so far. Okay, 2 months ago, the California Attorney General put this report out, data breach report. Everybody puts out data breach reports, right? Not a big deal. It goes in. It talks about some of the events that have happened in California over the past year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things that it does, and this is what caught my attention, this is why I bring it up, because I think it's important for everybody, They made 5 recommendations. And the first recommendation is, and I'm going to read this because I think it's so important. The first recommendation is the 20 controls in the CIS critical security controls identify a minimum level of information security that all organizations that collect or maintain personal information should meet. The failure to implement all the controls that apply to an organization's environment constitute a lack of reasonable security. Now, I'm not an attorney, but as a layman reading that, that looks to me like it says that if you suffer a data breach in California, and in the course of your incident response and forensics and all the legal stuff that happens later on, is determined that you did not have all 20 critical controls deployed, you're negligent and therefore subject to and deserve all of the consequences that go along with being negligent. That's a bar that we've all agreed nobody can meet, probably. So why do I put this up there? 2003, SB 1386. Does anybody remember SB 1386? California was the first state to write a data breach notification law. Today, 48 states have data breach notification laws. This is the beginning. This is going to happen. This is going to move across the country. Other states are, New Jersey just passed a law, or actually didn't pass a law. They passed a, I think it's a referendum. The Public Utilities Commission for New Jersey passed something similar to this for the Water Control Board in New Jersey. We're going to start seeing more and more of these things. So my point with this is the bar is being raised for us. The government is raising the bar for us that it makes it really, really hard for us, our companies, to live up to a bar this high. Okay. Last slide. I don't think we're paranoid enough. And that's a terrible thing to say in some respects, because some of us are very, very paranoid. But I don't think we're paranoid enough. We're still fighting yesterday's battles in many cases. I think the cloud gives us the opportunity to change the way our organizations think about security. And when you think about the comment earlier about Cisco's prediction of 86% of all compute will be done in the cloud by 2019, it gives us an opportunity to be paranoid enough that we can begin preparing our organizations for what's going to happen by 2019. A lot of companies, they may skip the hybrid piece and just go all in into the cloud. Certainly a small company today, there's no reason to go and buy a bunch of servers and build your own data center. You can get almost everything in the cloud. But I don't think we're paranoid enough as a community to at this point in time to be confident that we're doing everything that we're doing, that we need to be doing, and that our CEOs and our boards. Wendy and I were talking about this earlier. People always say, you have a blank check, go fix everything. Well, we all know that blank check is not really blank. There's some number in there somewhere. But part of our job, certainly as leaders in the security community, is to think about what those numbers might be. And oftentimes you don't get a whole lot of time and a whole lot of resources to build what that budget or what that what nirvana and security in your organization would be. But if you approach us with that paranoid mindset, you're always thinking about what tools, what services, what products, what kind of people, what kind of training do I need to get there where 2019 is taking us. So that's all of my slides. I have a couple of minutes for questions if anybody has a question. And I know that everybody wants to run to lunch.